I
There you
did it. I
go.
did it. I say I'm a bad millennial because I always mess up technology. I really do. But I
Awesome.
tease worst enemy. No, not Jeff again. Yes, sorry. I'm gonna go ahead here and share my screen. So, by a quick way of introduction here as well. So, we are Anderson Business Advisors. We are a law firm and we specialize in helping out real estate investors and small business owners. And it's actually really funny because and I'm going to skip ahead just a couple slides here, is because we absolutely are a law firm. We are attorneys. I am an attorney. I went through law school so that you don't have to. With that being said, though, we think of ourselves more as an education company where we want to take our experience and take advantage of that and then help you to take advantage of that so that you don't need to. We ourselves are especially our partners are successful real estate investors and attorneys as well. And so what happens is we can leverage that experience and then help other small business owners and investors to navigate the just frankly absurdly complicated world of liability, of protection, of estate planning, of tax planning, kind of all of the above. Okay, so why do we even do what we do? I'm almost like an anti-hero in the sense, like in a comic book, right? Where I'm like, I'm the attorney that's saving you from the other attorneys over there. They're the bad guys, not us. But it's kind of that question of, okay, so why? How does this actually work? Why do we do this? It's really unfortunate. I did my time in litigation. I worked in a much more traditional law firm setting before coming to Anderson, and I regrettably saw that attorneys earn their reputation. They do. And I don't say that to say that every single attorney that you meet on the street is an inherently evil person. But the issue is that the profession as a whole has kind of become, in a sense, a place where it doesn't really matter what truth or justice or statutes or laws or regulations say anymore. It's a matter of money and playing the game. And so if you are a successful real estate investor or small business owner, it puts a big target on your back because then we run into a very, very, very similar issue where if you have a slip and fall on your property, and even if all that happens is the client breaks a fingernail, they're still going to go take it to a plaintiff's attorney, personal injury attorney, just in this hypothetical example, right? Going to take it to a personal injury attorney. They're going to ask, hey, what can I do about this? The first question the personal injury attorney asks is not, do you have any medical bills? It's not, have you missed some time from work? It's not, do you have injuries that you can show, that have hampered your enjoyment of your life or whatever else? No, the first question they ask is, who owns the property where you had your slip and fall? And why do they ask that? Because the very next thing they're going to do is they're going to look it up. They're going to use Google, or sometimes they have special softwares they can use to search specific things really quickly. And then what they'll do is they will search. They'll look it up. And their primary determining factor of whether to proceed with a lawsuit or not is how wealthy is the opponent? How many assets does the other side have? And if your name shows up on a whole lot of properties, on several pieces of real estate, or as the owner of a really successful business, lawsuits going forward, whether or not the person who is injured actually has a good claim, lawsuit is moving forward. And so it's an unfortunate reality then that as real estate investors, we need to be prepared for not if, but when, whether it's a tenant, whether it's somebody completely unrelated to you that you just happen to bump into, whether it's something else unrelated. Like, for example, if your day job is a medical professional, as a medical professional, well, maybe it's a patient, right? Or an upset client from your day job. Whatever it is, it's unfortunately a win. So we want to be prepared for that. And so Justin here asked a really great question. Do we provide services for setting up trusts and LLCs for real estate? You bet. So you can see, and that's going to be my first point here, is talking about business entities, whether a corporation or an LLC. I'm going to be a good attorney, and I'm going to provide a quick disclaimer that, yeah, we're going to talk about a bunch of different strategies, but what applies to your situation may vary, right? It's so almost oversaid now, but every situation really is unique. And so if you decide to sign up with us and have us help you out moving forward, what we will talk about with you may look slightly different than what we're going to talk about today. But as a whole, I want to articulate and talk about a couple of specific principles. I tell all of my real estate investing clients, the very first thing we want to do more than anything else is we want to make sure that you are no longer investing in your personal name. That's the easiest way to provide just an already a great layer of protection right there, is say, okay, let's go ahead and let's take your name off of that public record. Yes, county recorders records, it feels a little redundant to say it that way, but that's what it is, is the records at the county recorder's office are publicly searchable. Anybody can find out who owns real estate. And if you are investing in your personal name, if you are making purchases of properties in your personal name, then people can just search it up. And a lot of counties have their records online now in the country. So you can just pull it up really quick as another quick anecdote. But an illustrative one nonetheless is we have an attorney who used to do like debt collections and things like that. And we had, so what happened is we had a client call in and say, hey, I want to see if I filed my deed properly. Is my name taken off of the county records? And without prompt, without me or one of our other colleagues asking this attorney, he responded within 2 minutes with 3 different screenshots of this client's name on the county records. So the way we do that then is we use either an LLC or a corporation. The idea is pretty straightforward. Now, again, an entity structure can get more complicated than this pretty quickly, but the principle is pretty straightforward. If you have a piece of real estate and you put it into an LLC, so you change the deed, you change the title so that the LLC stands for limited liability company, right? Limiting the liability. So if you put it into an LLC, then the basic idea is that liability is now limited. So we have a cap on that liability. So then what happens is if we're just going to use this classic example of a slip and fall. So if there's a slip and fall on your property and the plaintiff's attorney wants to go ahead and do an asset search, go online and see what you have. Well, what's going to turn up? Not you anymore. No, it's going to turn up the name of the LLC. Hey, that's a great start. That's what we want. And then even better, if they decide to move forward with an action, with a lawsuit of some sort, they sue the owner of the property. That's what you do in a slip and fall action is you sue the owner of the property where the incident occurred. And so again, if the property is in an LLC, who are they suing? Not you, because you're not the owner. It's the property, or pardon, the LLC. Sorry. So it's the LLC that they're suing. And so then they sue the LLC and not you personally. You personally now are protected. Your assets, your home, your investment accounts, your cars, your whatever else it might be are protected now because of that LLC. Again, it provides a cap or a containment field, even you could think of it that way, for that property that is owned by the LLC. Very importantly, the protection goes the other way as well. So now let's take the opposite scenario. Let's say you are in a car accident instead of a slip and fall. It's just heartbreaking. I was actually dealing with a client that was in a car accident recently, and it was a very similar thing, caused a lot of damage to the other party. And so we were talking about it. And so if you cause a car accident, then yeah, personal injury attorney is going to come snooping. If your properties are owned by an LLC, well, they can't take the properties. Why? Because you were in the car accident, not the LLC. And so we get protection both ways. You are protected from the property, and the property is protected from you. So that's the first thing is we say, okay, we want to have that LLC. Now, the second step I want to talk about here is we want to go ahead and use one LLC per property. This is a general rule. Again, there are going to be exceptions to this. Well, why do we do that? Well, because an LLC is absolutely better than nothing. But if we have all of our properties under one LLC, if we have 5, 6, 7 properties, again, we get both ways of those protections there, where I am protected from the properties, properties are protected from me. But then we run into the issue of, well, if something happens on one property, then all of the others that are owned underneath that same LLC, they're now at risk. And so then what we say is if you have one LLC per property, then we get a third layer or area of protection where the properties are protected from me, I am protected from them, and very importantly, they are protected from each other. So that's going to be our basic principle here. We like using LLCs, as you can see sort of here on the slide, because they are very flexible. We can use them in a myriad of different situations and make different tax elections based on, what you're doing with your properties or other things like that. Corporations are very specific for tax planning and can be used really, really well. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. So if you look on the diagram on the left, one of the things that we will talk about a lot if you're a client, and especially if you're a real estate investor, that's why I include the Wyoming LLC, is that not all LLCs are created equal. I know this is going to shock you, but California LLCs just don't measure up to LLCs that are formed in some other states. And so what we want then is we want to make sure that we use or take advantage of some of the laws, statutes, regulations, things like that in other states. And so we may say, so for example, kind of the big three for protection from lawsuits are Wyoming, Nevada, and Delaware. For most of our real estate investors, we will use a Wyoming parent company, if you will, and then we will have child LLCs. You could call them child LLCs, subsidiaries, or whatever other term you want to use, underneath that parent company. So there on the left, you can see we have an example of a local LLC, one each for each property, just two on this diagram for an easy example. And then each of those local LLCs will then funnel into or be owned by the parent company. That way, if we have a plaintiff's attorney who is particularly gung-ho, anyways, that they want to file a lawsuit anyways, even though they see this entity structure, then if they by some miracle break out of a local LLC, guess where they end up? In Wyoming. Not at you, but nobody wants to go to Wyoming for a lawsuit. No way. No way. Why? Because they know that Wyoming gives 100% no doubt, absolutely for sure advantages to business owners. And so, yeah, for our real estate investors, we like using Wyoming LLCs as a parent company. So Justin asked another question. It's a good one. It says, does it make sense to have more than one rental property in each LLC? The general answer is we want one property per LLC, as we were talking about. However, again, if we're talking about 35 properties, then yeah, we may talk about grouping the properties together based on location or value or what you're using them for or something like that. So it can get to be a little burdensome, but the protection is still unquestionably worth it. So now I want to talk about a couple of recommendations that we have as it relates to taxes. And so let's talk about, so now we had focused previously on the left-hand side of the screen. Now let's look at the diagram on the right. You'll see it looks very similar. So Christian asks, hey, if an attorney looks at what another person is worth, would it be possible to put the LLC in debt to hide sort of the LLC's value? That's a great question. So I'm going to answer this in two ways. This is something that I did not touch on, but it absolutely is part of the game. So Christian, it actually won't be the specific strategy that you talked about, but your general idea is absolutely correct. So I've kind of talked around it, but there's this other idea of not just having protection in court, but having protection sort of from the public eye, right? I've talked about how your name is publicly searchable if you invest in your personal name, and using LLCs prevents that. So one of the big things that we get here with an LLC is, and some people think this is wildly important, others don't really care for it, and I'm kind of in the middle. I think it's really important in the right context, but it's not the end all be all. And they call it anonymity, and that's what we call it too. Our partners, Clint Coons and Toby Mathis, talk about it somewhat frequently, where not only do you have protection in court, but you also have protection just from snooping eyes. One of the reasons we recommend a Wyoming LLC, besides just that awesome statute that I spent perhaps a little too much time talking about earlier, is that Wyoming does not track ownership of LLCs. So I'll give you an example. I'll use Texas. I saw that we had a few people from Texas here. So I'll use Texas as an example. Texas is an okay state for asset protection. Their statute is actually pretty solid, but there are a couple of other things that shy us away from using Texas LLCs regularly, unless you are investing in Texas. In that case, yes, we'd have to use Texas LLCs. But one of the things that happens though is Texas is not anonymous. So if you have a property that is owned by a Texas LLC, plaintiff's attorney wants to know who owns that property because there was a slip and fall. And so they look up who owns the property. Well, it's the 123 Main Street LLC. But you know what they can do in Texas is they can then just go ahead and search on the Texas Secretary of State website. Okay, who owns the 123 Main Street LLC? And your name shows up. Now, to be sure, again, does this give them the right to sue you? No, the Texas LLC still owns the property. So you still have an advantage in court. I want to be clear about that. It's also true, though, that, well, now they know who you are. And that can be a little frustrating. And then they can try to see, well, what other LLCs does this person own? What other assets do they have? And they can look you up from there. Now, if we add an extra layer to this, if we say, okay, the owner of the Texas LLC is now a Wyoming LLC. So now, again, continuing this hypothetical scenario, plaintiff's attorney looks up who owns 123 Main Street LLC in Texas. They see a Wyoming LLC. And the Wyoming, so they search on the Wyoming Secretary of State website and they say, who owns this Wyoming LLC? And Wyoming kind of says back, we didn't ask. And it's funny because it's not that it's hidden, not that the information, the ownership information is hidden behind some secret paywall or whatever. No, Wyoming literally doesn't have it. Like when we file Wyoming LLCs for people, we just literally state, like we have one of our employees. I'll just use my name, not to give away their names unnecessarily, but like all Wyoming asks is, what is your name, person filing this LLC? And I say, I'm Jeff. And Wyoming says, cool, Jeff. And then that's it. They don't ask who's the owner of this LLC, who's the manager, anything like that. It's like, cool, Jeff, thanks for giving us a filing fee. And then we move on. So I say that to say Wyoming doesn't ask for ownership. And so when we set up a structure like this, Christian, I apologize, this ended up a little more long-winded, but I kind of wanted to emphasize this point here. That while we don't always necessarily have liens or outstanding debts like that, yes, absolutely, making it look like you don't own anything or making you not discoverable is absolutely a strategy in and of itself. And now, again, does this replace the actual protection in court? No, but it is totally helpful because if an attorney can't find out who owns the LLC, they can't look you up to see if you're wealthy elsewhere. And again, when they see that Wyoming LLC there on the top, so many attorneys, they just give up. Because if they're looking for a frivolous lawsuit or a big case or something like that, or a big simple paycheck for a settlement, they're not going to get that. That's for sure. Not by suing a Wyoming LLC. So that general idea of making yourself look less attractive to plaintiff's attorneys, 100%. That's exactly right. Great question, Christian. So let's talk briefly. I'm going to just give a 20-second breakdown on why we recommend corporations here. Looking on this right-hand side of the screen here on that diagram. So we have corporations. We recommend using corporations for active income. The IRS has specifically designated that purchasing a property with the intent to sell, i.e. flipping, right? I buy a property because I want to rehab it and then sell it. It counts as active income. And we can do some really fun tax planning with it. And so for both protection and tax planning, we'll recommend using a corporation and then LLCs for each property that you flip. You flip a property, sell it out of the LLC, close the LLC. Now the buyer can't come back and sue you. Well, the LLC that sold the property is closed now. Sorry. That's really great. So then Brandy asks, if we're using a local corporation, will it be a Wyoming corporation or could it be Delaware? That's a good question. Generally speaking, because flipping is active income, we actually need the corporation to be in the state where the flipping is taking place. So if you are, we've used Texas and we've used a couple other states. So let's go ahead. I'm just gonna I have a couple of clients that are investing in Nebraska right now. So let's use Nebraska as an example. So if we are buying and selling properties in Nebraska regularly, I'm buying a property, rehabbing, selling. Maybe I'm developing properties or doing other things that are active income. I need to have my corporation registered in Nebraska. The reason for this is unlike passive properties that you just sit and hold and collect rent. For active properties, where we are actively engaging in the purpose of grabbing income in Nebraska in this case. And so we do have to register. I realize that's not really a formal way to say it. I can cite to the different court precedences, but nobody cares about that. But just trust me when I say, like, yeah, unfortunately, we do have to usually use a local state corporation. Brandy's question, though, gets at a good point. Delaware is another really great state for corporations for other reasons. A lot of a couple of my IT area clients will use Delaware corporations for other reasons, for their IT businesses, if they're going to have investors and things like that. Thank you, everybody, so much for jumping on with us today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad we got into some good questions, because I always love talking about what you want to talk about. So I cannot recommend enough, again, what the wonderful crew here at Backflip is doing. So anyways, Mariah, it's a
Awesome.
pleasure to be here, and everybody else, thank you again so much for having me. We love, this
Yes.
has been outstanding.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, y'all.